talking about how we look at our life from the perspective being responsible to do something. So it's not just a theoretical analysis or understanding about these kind of populations or situations. What would be my contribution to the overall process of empowerment of these kind of communities? In the entire process, of course, one of the key strategies is participation, whereby one approach could be I am perceiving myself at a very high pedestal and then seeing that I have to do something for these people, or be one of them and with their participation try to build their life. That will be much more sustainable, that will be much more long-standing. And when I talk about participation, it's not about this kind of participation. It's there, they're right at the grassroots, on the soil with them. This also talks about the strength of the symbols, the pictures that we see around almost every day. For example, probably this is a picture which describes our profession of social work, whereby even a monk may retire. But especially when you are working with developing countries or even in other developed countries as well, there are a plethora of issues and almost our entire life, our mind, brain, sensitivity and heart keeps on throbbing for these people and what better we can do for them. Talking again about how these pictures can be important, I would like to share with you one of the pictures which really changed my life. The power of pictures, and thanks to Professor Gunil, she requested me to share my journey as a social work professional and volunteer. I was at a very typical point in my life after completing my master's degree. I did in MBA management and from a very reputed institution. Whether I should go into the commercial sector and keep money as the prime thing of my life, or do something much more meaningful for the society. It was really a dilemma. I am talking about 1993, whereby a very handsome salary by Indian standards, 35,000 rupees a month, which was quite a lot at that time. And as compared to that, there was an opportunity which was 1/8 of that salary, but it involved working with the tribals in a very remote area of India, because there were hunger days and child malnutrition days, almost akin to the situation you listened earlier. And then it was really a very tough call. Then I saw this poster at one place and it really clicked. It took almost no time for me to take that decision. That you understand this symbolism, whereby there is fight for supremacy amongst rats. So there is a heap of dead rats and blood flowing all over. And there is this winner rat, the king rat, with a small crown and sword dripping with blood. And the caption was really captivating. It says that in a rat race, even if I win, I am no more than a rat. So it really triggered my decision, and I decided to work with those tribals. Those villages, a cluster of around 30 villages, it had suffered a lot because of the hunger days and child malnutrition days. Over the next 5 to 6 years period, we developed a very different concept model with them, actually working on field that is regarded as Wadi model, which is regarded as one of the role models for tribal empowerment in India. There, of course, as we were listening earlier, it's very different, a planet within a planet. Acute poverty, you can imagine, where people die of hunger deaths and child malnutrition. It's a very different kind of planet altogether. So it coexists with our world. Many times we also don't realize. Same is the case in India. In India too, many people may not be aware that this kind of world resides there within their own country. This gave me plenty of opportunity to introspect myself. Why I am here, the things I have to do, I am doing, etc. There was also a genesis of working with the slum dweller children, and can we develop some innovation? Why innovation? Because the earlier solutions couldn't effectively address this kind of acute poverty. So can I look for more effective, more efficient solutions as innovations to bring about the empowerment? explained, and then I am talking about a situation whereby the annual income, the yearly income was as low as Indian rupees 7,800. Maybe translated into kronas, they could be around 780, 800 kronas, 900 kronas max. I am talking about annual income for the year for 12 months of around 1993. You can imagine the situation how people would be surviving in this kind of context. Then there I met good number of friends, those children, excellent, such a different life they live. If you leave aside the poverty part of it, there were so many things to learn for me from those children. And it was a very enriching kind of experience. But the major thing I learned was, should I keep grumbling about life? Because there I realized having 2 square meals a day is such a blessing, such a benediction. You call it luck or you call it whatever it is. But to having 2 square meals a day is such a different thing. And then you never have any complaint about life. You realize that every bite you get is what not many other people don't get. Then we tried to replicate this concept model thanks to the European Union. This was the largest European Union supported project for NGOs, worth 19.5 million euros. They visited, the ambassador of the European Union to India, they visited us in 1995-96 to take a look at this concept, and then how we can replicate it further. And then it became one of the biggest poverty alleviation program, the NGO supported poverty alleviation program of the European Union. There I could get opportunity to lead a fascinating team of 220 professionals, and then many sensitive minds and hearts got involved in the entire process. To capture my learnings through this entire process was first to understand assets of my own life. As I said earlier, having 2 square meals a day is such a blessing, such a benediction. Not many people don't have. Then there is much more to life and career than just money. Also, the learning said that if somebody wants to have this kind of career, one of the very important things should be passion. So it really needs to get driven by a dream. I need to tell you, in India we conduct a program called Sweden India program. The next phase will be on coming 22nd and 23rd. The way me and my team starts the program is again building on the symbol, building on the picture. We ask those students, the MSW students from Sweden when they visit us, we ask them to draw a picture about a theme, about their dreams in social work, what change they wish to bring on a specific theme. So there can be a number of issues very close to you in Sweden, in Thailand, or any other part of the world. But draw a picture of that. The condition is you shouldn't write any word on it. The word is bad. It has to be only described the current situation. For example, if my own life mission, my own dream is to make this world a better place without child labor. So I have to draw a picture on issues of the elderly, issues of women, gender equality. I have to write a picture of the current state. And then 3 years down the line, what change will happen through my efforts. But again, that has to be explained in a picture. And then the entire discussion is built on our entire Swindia workshop, the Sweden India workshop, is built on that discussion of their narration, their elucidation, their rationale for why they think this picture and that picture. So very crucial for us. But the basic driving point is I need to introspect, I need to ask myself whether I am a dreamer or just it's run-of-the-mill life for me, others are doing, so do I, etc. Thus, passion and competency, they go hand in hand when we talk about social work in our kind of context. Another key thing that is very crucial when we see for ourselves is whether I am in the driver's seat of my life, or whether, irrespective of my age, I am just like that cute little girl. Are you getting the point? Then when we turn to the core aspect of today's discussion, we talk about equality, we talk about inclusion, there can be a number of definitions and theories about it. India was was very much blessed and the world was blessed to have Mahatma Gandhi. In case some of from this group are vying for international careers, you might be aware that inclusive development, inclusive growth is becoming key policy for lot many developing countries. If I talk about India, India's policy making is driven by 5-year plans. So last 5 years, the current 5-year plan, 2012 to 17, etc. So it gets driven by those 5-year plans. For India, for last 2 5-year plans, the successive theme has been inclusive growth and inclusive development. There can be definitions and definitions. But as I was narrating earlier, we are very fortunate to have Mahatma Gandhi ji. Having taken work on this planet, the simplest definition was given by him. I'll take a pause till that time you have a look at this definition. Maybe to make it more visible. So it says, recall the face of the poorest and the weakest man or woman you have made in your life. And then ask yourself, the kind of actions, the kind of policies, strategies, or whatever jargon we may wish to use, what link that action, that policy, strategy, etc. will have with that poorest man or woman I have ever seen in life. And if you see a very direct positive correlation between that, then yes, it is inclusive growth, it is inclusive development. We did not use all the jargon for that. It can be as simple as it. So this was one of the last moves left behind by Mahatma Gandhi in 1948. This was the test of inclusiveness. We do research on international forum, but our focus is always on the innovations, trying to identify the gaps in which we can really contribute. For example, the very crucial gap that we have identified is making men responsible for women's health. So how we can do it, and that has been a very long-standing dream, and as it was narrated earlier, Honorable Country Representative of United Nations Population Fund would be visiting us on 24 in India to launch this movement. We call it global movement, because it's almost in not many developing countries, and it has its own manifestation in developed countries as well. So the first driving question for a group like this, for me, for my team, always goes is, when I plan something, I need to identify the most excluded sections. When we try to capture this as research, because research becomes one of your key themes, and I was advised by the organizers that I speak more on the participatory research and the innovations in participatory research. So I'm dedicating the rest of the part to those innovations, what different thought we are getting to our own learnings from field. I will base my further narration on one of the very path-breaking research that we did for United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA. You might be aware this United Nations agency specializes in women's reproductive health and health-related issues. So they asked us to conduct impact assessment of one of their very crucial programs for adolescent health, which is called as adolescent friendly health clinics. So we did impact assessment of this program for them. And then what happened further? I wish to add that. Why I am talking about this today? Because it is a very crucial innovation. How a social worker, a sensitive social worker with a long-term perspective and vision can look at the same phenomenon differently. And it has very important policy implications for adolescent health in India and developing countries too. There too, as you will grow up as professionals, some of the fundamental issues that we will handle is, when we talk about vulnerable population, be they nomadic tribes, tribals, gender inequality issues, etc., when we do research with them and not on them, are they just subjects of research, object of research, or there is much more beyond that? As we treat in our International Center of Equity of All India Institute of Local Self-Government, they are partners to research. When we talk about co-production, it need not be always just industry or other universities, academia, or government. For us, the primary primary stakeholders, those poor people, are also co-production partners in the entire process. This actually gives an entirely different outlook to what we think about them. The second aspect is, can we develop the entire research framework design with them? Because there can be two options. Even you consider them as partners, take their wholehearted participation in the process. But who really drives the process? For example, whether the research framework is driven by somebody else, we as outsiders, and they just participate in answering that, or whether they are participant to develop that research framework, to identify the key parameters as well. I'll narrate this with this specific example. The second issue, very important for us, the social work professionals, is what after research. Each one of us conducts research, I believe it's a part of your curriculum as well. But is research an end in itself? Or we as social work professionals have much more greater responsibility. Probably research, end of research could be a starting point for the transformation process. For example, I do some research on gender inequality. So is that an end in itself, a few points scored, and then go further? Or do I have a responsibility of to take that process further, to take the learnings I accumulated through my research, to translate them into reality, is the key question that we need to address. The illustration that I am using here is, after we conducted that research for UNFPA, developed report for them, then we realized there is a huge knowledge gap in terms of issues of adolescents, for adolescents themselves, plus the outside society. And it's quite serious in India, because India is the largest adolescent population in the world. Especially it gets more aggravated in communities like nomadic tribes and others, whereby there has been less access to services and less access to information as well. Then we decided to convert that entire knowledge into portable, what we call IEC kit or resource kit. We converted that into very, very simple kind of tools, knowledge tools, the IEC tools, and this travels an exhibition from place to place. It is handed over to communities, to government agencies, and they are utilizing it. But what this contains? So this is the background about this research on adolescent-friendly health clinics, and very intensive participatory method we conducted. But a very significant methodology which was used, by the parameters of research were identified with those adolescents. We conducted a number of focus group discussions with adolescents and key person interviews with the concerned people like government, health machinery, etc. But instead of going with a very rigid framework, we had our own brainstorming and discussion sessions, and we identified the queries that need to go with that. But not taking this as a very ready-made prescription. For the pilot focus group discussions we had, we sat with those adolescents and tried to look at life from their own perspective, which is very different than my perspective. It led to a very fascinating list of various parameters for research that we identified with them. Most of from our list were covered, but from their perspective about life, there were a good number of other parameters as well. Very fascinating thing for us as researchers. Another crucial aspect which is not visible here, that's why I would press escape for a bit, that this ranking still is not visible. Actually, there on the right side there is a column for ranking by boys. When we talk about gender issues, we talk about just issues of women, which is very crucial. But through this kind of researches, we have realized that adolescent girls is a very important subpart of the entire gender dynamics we talk about. So instead of taking this adolescent research as a monolithic thing, the thing we did was, there was a gender segregated focus group discussion tool embedded in the entire process, and the gender segregated analysis that we undertook. So on the right side, actually you can see there are various parameters identified. The right side by boys talks about the ranking for specific parameters. For example, this gets divided into two parts. One thing talks about the impact of the FHC program which we were asked to do. We added the second part to it, talking about envisioning. how those adolescents think about future, what are their needs. That was the additional thing, and there I link it to the futuristic perspective. A research need not and should not end with the just status analysis. There has to be this futuristic vision with actions embedded in it, or planning for actions embedded in it. So it was very crucial to understand this entire life through their perspective. And then it led to some kind of scientific analysis whereby for these parameters they were asked to prioritize. For example, some of the impacts were more prominent with girls than boys, or vice versa, more prominent with boys than girls. Not only that, some of the impacts were of greater importance for girls than boys. So for each group we asked them, after identifying the parameters with them, we asked them to prioritize. Like which of them they feel are of greater importance. Same is the case with needs. I just quickly run through this because those posters are here for you. In case somebody is interested, can subsequently have a look at that exhibition. The innovation that we did was addition of this ranking for impacts and needs, but very crucially, this led to a gender diversity analysis. To understand how boys and girls think different, adolescent boys and girls think differently about the same phenomenon. And then I won't go into much details, the report is available, I can email you the soft copy of that report, whereby we went to the details to understand, and then crucial policy implications emerged through this analysis, that how girls look at this phenomenon about their future needs as well. So what proximity to an adolescent friendly health clinic means different to a girl than to a boy. My entire point here is twofold. One is how we involve them as co-production partners, the community, instead of going with a very rigid kind of design framework, how they can get involved as co-production partners, and then what we do in future. So we converted, talking about future as I narrated earlier, we converted this into a resource kit, whereby talking to various stakeholders to develop better sensitivity about needs of adolescents, their health requirements, etc. Such researchers, now if I try to expand this further to some other domains of research, such modus operandi, such very innovative way of thinking of researchers has helped us to identify very crucial aspects on which we need to work further. One thing which I talked earlier about, men for women's health, and having that going as a global movement, we wish to launch that. The second aspect is developing gender gap reports. You might be aware that gender gap report developed by World Economic Forum is currently at the national level. It's a country-wise analysis whereby the latest report says that India ranks 135 out of 136 countries, very precarious condition when it comes to women's health. But that is on a national level aggregation. What we intend to do is, can we have it at the grassroots level? So having the gender gap report for a village, for a city, which influences the actions like gender budgeting for that respective place, is very crucial for us. So our innovations have led us to this kind of newer aspects that we are exploring. The last part which I wish to talk about is, when we talk about innovations and innovations in research, it can't be a very automatic process, that we can't expect that if I get a current, if I get a trigger, then innovation will happen. It's not that way. Can we have it as a very conscious, a very systematic scientific process? And we had our own endeavors, our own initiatives on that front. But very importantly, it has to become an organizational culture, highly encouraged. Some of the results are very visible here. This is a global innovation which I could develop with my team, which talks about management and maintenance of tenements. You might be aware that slums is a big issue in lot many Asian countries. I have been to the biggest slum in Bangkok with a friend of mine, Dr. Puchong. And it's almost everywhere, especially in the developing countries. You might be surprised that slums development, when it happens, it hasn't been yet developed as a scientific body of knowledge. So we tried this global innovation, thereby again the parameters were identified with the redevelop slum community. And then we realize that there are lot many, especially women, who are illiterate, semi-literate, and there is this entire bandwidth of education and literacy. So we can't presume that the written words could be useful for them. So the parameters we've identified, it was converted into a kind of self-assessment tool, whereby instead of me coming from outside from my own frame of reference and then doing their assessment, can I enable them, can I facilitate them, can I empower them to undertake their own assessment? Became the entire center of attention for us. And then we converted this into very simple symbols, very simple pictures, which they can easily identify. Now, it was a very long process. It was not as easy, because identifying a parameter and then having an artist on board. Again, the colors have their own science. These are called as Disney colors. Disney colors, whereby you may notice that those are so catchy, so attractive. So even though they talk about a serious issue, they are catchy enough to keep the attention of the people who are undertaking that task. So actually now in many slums, the slum dwellers themselves assess their own situation. So now the research, our research could have ended with just us doing a research, putting it in a report and giving it to funding agency, which was Government of India. And Government of India's one very important policy mechanism, essentially support to national policies for urban poverty reduction. Or what about sustainability? So we decided to convert that into a tool which can be used by the community, not only for self-assessment. There is a provision for planning by the community. Again, when we, especially in the context of developing countries, it's quite a complex mechanism. It's not just sufficient enough when you talk about community, because it can be a very generic mass. There has to be a very further detailed planning with community representatives. That's why you can see the same set of 23 plus kind of symbols there in two colors. So one is, these ones are to be done by the community representatives, and the next one by the community itself. The point is, when I conduct a research, especially in terms of vulnerable population, what is my accountability to ensure sustainability of that process further becomes very crucial, and this can be done in a very, very simple way. Those pictures, those symbols really become very crucial, especially with the illiterate or all kinds of population. As I narrated earlier, so first India program we start with MSW professionals like you, with this as the first stage, where there is something very inherent with us as human beings. I believe the research fraternity is much more engrossed with ultra serious analysis of words, getting too verbose. But there can be much degree of strength when we talk about the human sensitivity. When we talk about changing the situation, then probably, as I said, one picture changed my life. It can be have such a strength. Can we utilize these kind of tools for our researches as well? This really becomes a driving point for lot many things. This approach has enabled us to establish our International Center for Women in Deprivation, and we are thankful to MDA during the visit of MDH team to India this February. We launched this International Center for